So today, in the third of 6 or 7 parts in this whipped sugar soap scrub journey, we are going to be making a completely different soap paste. And that soap paste is actually inspired by someone that commented in that Saponification Nation thread in interesting ways that I then talked to offline in DMs because she reached out to me and I assisted her with the problems that she was experiencing and how to fix it, really. And so we're going to actually use her recipe for all of this. And I'm going to tell you more about why we're doing that and why it's going to be a good time and all of the soapy things. But before we do, hello, I am Mrs. Soap and Clay. Let's make stuff. I literally just combined just do it and let's make stuff. Just make stuff. How's it going, Sudsers? Welcome back to the channel. You are at Soap and Clay, where we make all the soapy things, and you are here for day 349 of 365 days of soap, and it's part 3 of a 6 or 7 part series of whipped sugar soap scrubs and how to achieve them. Today, as I said, we'll be using a different soap paste recipe and then converting that into a whipped sugar soap scrub, and this recipe is not mine. And we are going to use this as a teaching moment for anything that you may be experiencing when you are creating a soap paste that is not mine. Because I have said kind of any soap paste will do, and that's true. But when I say that, the assumption is it's a well-balanced soap recipe to begin with, and this one super was not. Now, this came to my attention actually because a gal commented on the original thread in Saponification Nation and said that she had used my recipe and that it was awful. Like, it was super, super thick, which is weird because Rachel's was just ribboning off of, her paddle and therefore not thick. And also that it left a waxy film on herself, on the tub, whatever. And so, of course, I paid attention to that. Like, wow, that super shouldn't be the case based on the original soap that was made with that. So I read on, looking for her name and trying to figure out what happened. And it was revealed both within the comment section in unrelated comments, as well as in the DMs that she sent me asking for assistance, that she completely changed my recipe. It would be more accurate for her to have stated, I got the idea to make a whipped sugar soap scrub from a soap base because I saw this Soap and Clay recipe. But she didn't actually use my recipe, but she said that she did. As an aside, anybody who's actually engaging in like those soap forums, you guys should be careful with comments like that, because that is in fact defamation. That is the literal definition of defamation. You misrepresented a company and a brand in ways that could hurt said company and brand with knowingly false information, saying that you used my recipe when in fact you changed the entire thing, like it's not even close, which we're going to talk about and see in all of this, is dangerous. That's a dangerous place to be in life, and I see that way too often in these soap forums. Like, another example of that would be the random posts that continue to exist about Buff City soaps and saying that they don't cure their soap. That is demonstrably false. That is not an accurate statement. It exists because somebody looked at their soap making workshop FAQ thing on their website. And in the FAQs, the things that they send home, because they do soap making on site the way that I do, right? And the things that they send home with the people that have just made the soap is talking about saponification and how it's safe to use in 48 hours. But they then go on to say the longer you let the soap sit, the better the bubble is, the longer it will last. Right. They do in fact cure their soaps, and a simple call or email to the company in question asking them about that, even asking for their batch codes just to see, whatever, will verify that. That is easily verified to be a false statement, therefore defamation. And it doesn't matter in this world if you're just parroting something that you heard. In fact, it's worse if you're just parroting something that you heard from a friend of a friend of a friend's cousin. Whatever, you're still liable for continuing to spread. Like, there's an actual term for it in the defamation world. So given everything that's been going on with, Alex Jones and Johnny Depp and even YouTubers online that are literally being sued for defamation right now, it's a very hot button issue. So be very careful about the bad information that you post out there. Really think twice before you do it. That said, I had a conversation with this gal. She gave me her recipe, and she effectively changed everything within the soap paste, thus yielding a very strange end result. And it made a lot of sense once I learned what it was that she had done. And so we are going to make this recipe today, which is weird because it contains a crap ton of tallow. I have no idea how to source tallow. Gonna have to figure it out. This is going to be a good time, and we are going to talk about within all of this how you substitute oils for your soap paste to achieve your end goal of your whipped sugar soap scrub, and whether it's salvageable afterwards. So, let's get to the video because there's actually a lot to cover and we need to cover that. So let's go. Okay, so good news. One of my neighbors and very dear friends actually happened to have tallow, and she agreed to give me some of that guy. But by give me some of that guy, she wanted to come to the soap shop and make some soap with it. And so we did. And these are the fruits of her labor. And so I'm grinding up some of it to use in this recipe, and then she can have the rest because it's a weird recipe, but if she wants it, she's super welcome to it. But the reason why I am doing this is because I thought we could use this as a teaching moment with how to sub oils, generally speaking, in, recipes just in general. And I know we've talked about that a lot, but in regards to making a soap paste that you're then turning into a soap base and adding solvents to it to sort of extend the chains, it becomes even more important. And the reason why we are using this specific recipe with these specific ingredients is because one of the comments that came up on the Saponification Nation page said that they tried my recipe, see that, and they just tweaked it a little bit. They used tallow instead of mango and no coconut oil, just olive, and it was waxy and all the things. Granted, I used different ingredients, but the formula was still the same. Yeah, that's not the same thing. Like, just sticking with a percentage of something is not the same thing as actually using the same recipe. Just because your percentages still say 50%, 30%, 15%, and 5%, that doesn't mean that you've created the same thing. And so then I was further confused by all of this when I got an email from the same gal who wanted some help with it. And she, did say the same thing with the tallow there, as you can see. And then she said that she subbed the coconut for canola not much. And so I didn't super know in which instance she was being accurate with her recipe, right? And so what I did in order to, figure out where this went wrong so I can show it to her and help her out with it, I basically split the difference, really. So all of the tallow went away, or all the mango went away, was replaced with tallow. The olive oil stayed. the castor oil stayed, and I ended up putting some coconut in and some canola in to soap calc to get all of the fatty acid profiles, your unsaturated versus your saturated fats, so I could then send it through to her and help her with her fatty acid problems with this recipe. Okay, so in my recipe in soap calc, we are working with the following, ratios for everything. And we've got, 56 foot conditioning overall. Again, you're looking at the blue here, the all, because that's the total recipe-ish. We've been through this. And we have a pretty conditioning bar with that 44 oleic, which is a thing for sure. And then look at the saturated fats, the 42 to 58. Okay. Now, that's the thing that I'm actually more concerned about on the outset with her recipe, because there's going to be a lot more unsaturated fats in a recipe wherein you have removed all of your coconut or a portion, especially in a recipe like this that has very little coconut oil in it. And, what you're really going to gain from the coconut oil is going to be the bubblers, but it's also a saturated fat, so from the fatty acid. And so first and foremost, already concerned about that. Also the properties of the tallow, not great. And it's not that they're not great in general. I don't intrinsically have a problem with using tallow in soaps at all. It makes a great bar of soap. I don't use it because I run a strictly vegan line, but in this application, when you have eliminated all of your bubblers, effectively all of your bubblers, you're going to get some lather stabilization from keeping the castor, but there's really no more bubblers in there. And with the tallow, you're going to be adding, yes, more stearic to the recipe, but also more palmitic. And in and of itself, that recipe as a soap bar might be fine. But when we are looking at such a huge deviation in saturated to unsaturated fats within an application wherein you are wanting to turn it into a soap paste, wherein you're wanting to add solvents, the unsaturated fats, they can be a lot, well, depending on specifically which fatty acid profile we're talking about, they can be much more difficult to actually break down in the solvents. And so you are probably going to end up with a reasonably thick batch of soap for sure. And I can see why there would be a waxy substance on that as well. Now, while this is whipping, I haven't actually shown you her soap calc information because I want to show you, the whip. In a little bit, I will be going to the, mixing or the filling rather of all of the containers, and I am going to do weird stuff with that wherein I'm just adding more avocado oil to each of it to see if I can get it more fluid, the actual whip itself. But yeah, that's really thick for sure. That is a very thick recipe, absolutely. It's not impossible to pipe. You just get yourself one of those proper tips, the ones that I never have ever. But it's not impossible, I guess, but it is very, very thick. And so I personally would want that much thinner. You might love it. So, keep that in mind for sure. If that's the thickness that you're wanting, I mean, live your best life. That's good. But as she specifically mentioned, it was too thick. And again, that's a wild deviation from what was happening. That's me putting the preservative in. I know we haven't talked a lot about preservatives, but we will get there when we talk about troubleshooting for sure. Anyway, it's a wild deviation from what the original post said when Rachel said that hers was thin. And you just see from that screen cap how true that is, right? And so it's not the same, there's two different outcomes with all of this, wildly different. And that's because the recipe was not the same recipe at all. Like, not even remotely. And again, you guys, seriously, be careful with those comments. That's seriously, I'm looking out for you. That right there with her first comment when she said she tried that recipe and it came out like absolute garbage, when in fact it is revealed through the comments and through an email that she didn't try my recipe. It deviated a lot. like a lot, that's defamation. You know, let's not do that. You don't want to get in trouble with the things that are said. I mean, not about me, but not about anyone. And just be very careful with your words these days. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. But yes, as you can see, this is really thick, and I don't know. Yep, I haven't even put the sugar in yet. Now, from what Rachel had said in her original post, it got thin when the sugar went in. And that can definitely happen if you are whipping it when the whole mixture is too warm. Just too much energy going on in there. And so maybe we can get this one to get thin and pipeable right now by adding the sugar. And as you can see, that answer is no. That it's not happening. If anything, I think it's getting thicker, like by a lot. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, the amounts of the palmitic and the stearic in there, and a cold solution, and the fact that they are very notoriously hard to break down into high of an amount within a solvent. Yeah, it's gonna get thick, even if it's cold. I mean, especially if it's cold. Again, this might be your whole thing though. You might love this. I actually, at this point, don't think it is pipeable. And so I am going to just start playing with it. And I'm just going to add a little bit of oil to everything after I get I'm going to get one container out. And then I'm going to add a little bit of oil to the entire batch, whip it in, get another container prepped, and then just continue doing it just to see if we get any more liquidity throughout all of this. So since we're doing that right now, I will show you, her recipe and her breakdown of all of her fatty acids and her saturated and unsaturated fats. Okay, so here's what I plugged into Soap Calc based on what she had said on the Facebook page, as well as what she had told me in emails. And look right off the bat, the saturated to unsaturated, you are by nature going to get no lather whatsoever with numbers that high. And also, just with the increase in the oleic, and we are looking at the decrease in the lauric, because no coconut oil to sort of balance it out, that slime or that waxy feeling that she was talking about in her comments, yeah, that's gonna really come from your oleic, because wherein that's historically slimy in a regular bar of cold process soap, it's going to be waxy when you start mixing it with these solvents and playing with it in this particular application. So actually that does make sense. There will be a buildup of sorts. Let's go ahead and look at these two recipes side by side while I'm doing weird stuff with soap, and compare the two so we can actually see what we're working with. Okay, so with all of this, we have a decrease in the lauric and the myristic both, and those are both saturated fats. They contribute to bar hardness and bubblers. We have an increase in the palmitic, which is also a saturated, and a decrease in the stearic. Interesting, but that's also a saturated. And then the ricinoleic stays the same. Your oleic and your linoleic both increase by quite a bit, thus putting this recipe at a whole lot of unsaturated fats because of that increase. And so again, yeah, like with a full-on Castile soap, when you have like just a primarily olive oil soap, right? And olive oil's basic breakdown is around 70% oleic, which is unsaturated. Linoleic is around 10%-ish, which is also unsaturated. And then your palmitic and your stearic exists in there kind of to make up the rest, which are your saturated fats. It's already at an imbalance, like a 30-70, right? Ish. And that is going to be in a Castile soap, like a cold process or hot process, the reason why you experience a slimy lather. Lots of these unsaturated fats that are having a really hard time because of the molecular formula of these individual oils and what happens when they become saponified versions of. Okay, without getting too terribly complicated with all of this, just keep in mind that because of these oils, some are just harder to spread out and, alter with your solvents than others. And so just a good rule of thumb when you are trying to make a soap paste into a whipped sugar soap scrub or anything wherein you are using solvents, just keep an eye on that saturated to unsaturated ratio. For me, I generally just like to keep my saturated to unsaturated pretty even just across the board, because obviously I want the moisturizing properties, but I'm always going to want that big bubble. And so she unfortunately is dealing with a double whammy of no lather whatsoever with a recipe like this per her reporting, because when you get it into this, things can get weird, and also a potentially waxy consistency. I can see that. I can see why that would be the thing, again, because of the increased amounts in your unsaturated fats. So if nothing else, let this be a reminder. I mean, I know we talked about this within the Back to Basics playlist for the cold process that we did before, and we've talked about fatty acid profiles a whole lot in lots of videos over the years. Just let this be a friendly reminder to do pay attention to your fatty acid profiles and what you're putting into your soap somewhat. Also, there are always reasons that you don't pay attention to that or other things within soap calc, but for this application, just because you are really effectively trying to do something that's chemically interesting, okay? So like the bonding and everything that goes on with turning a cold process soap, saponified soap, into a melt and pour or a solvent soap with your glycerins that you can then whip and do things, and then the addition of sugar to boot with all of that and the bonds that it wants to form with, water and or glycerin, really, and the way that the fatty acid chains of the oils and the saponified oils disrupt those. It's an interesting chemical process. It's not really, okay, that's gone. It's not really complicated, but it is interesting. And so therefore it does require a little bit more care with the actual, saturated to unsaturated at the end of the day. Maybe that's just the net for the TLDR. Sorry. I don't like getting too deep in the weeds with the chemistry stuff because I know that it's interesting, but also when we are trying to deliver a specific thing, if I talk too much about it, it all gets a little bit head spinny for the end user. And so I'm trying to not. So what we are going to do with all of this is we are going to test all of these different versions, wherein effectively each time I added another tablespoon of avocado oil after this original. And yes, it's low lather for sure. I'm not really seeing anything as far as the waxy bit is concerned. So I'm not quite sure on that. But also my hands have been put through the ringer with all of this, so I might not feel anything. Anyway, I essentially put in another tablespoon of avocado oil to the main batch with each, taking out for filling a container, just to show you, because lots of questions about maybe we add more oil also came up in that thread. So I want to show you that too. What happens if you add more oil? Does it thin it out? No. It really doesn't, and you are actually running the risk, if you put too much oil into this, of the actual oils separating from the entire solution, because it isn't really built with it already has a 5% superfat with the soap paste itself, so it's not really built to withstand too terribly much more oil. But, let's try it. I'll give you an actual visual example of just putting more stuff in and, just kind of wasting my materials so you can see it. Now, also interesting, though, is the more avocado oil that we put in there, it sort of gets a better bubble. Not mad at that. It's pretty nice. And the sugar is obviously standing up within all of it and not dissolving or doing anything because, well, I mean, I think we talked about that yesterday, right? With sugar and glycerin and water, and how, yes, it does dissolve. Sugar will dissolve in glycerin and water eventually, but under the right constraints, you can get it to go quickly. Otherwise, mostly sugar just exists on its own, especially in a more complicated solution like this, wherein the water and the glycerin are working with the saponified soaps and their molecular structure to form new bonds to break them apart. And so that sugar is getting to really stand on its own. So no, it's not dissolving. Now, if you get it hot, it might dissolve. So pay attention to your temperatures for sure, but it has to be pretty hot in order to do that. Anyway, sugar is all working out. Also, I just stuck my hand in a beaker that I have here with glycerin and sugar that's been sitting here for 2 weeks at this point. I just put equal parts of glycerin and sugar in there, and it's still super scrubby. Hasn't broken it down. I haven't done anything. I haven't agitated it. I haven't heated it. I've just let it sit, and the sugar's still there. Still weighs the same too. It's fun. You should test it. That's actually a pretty nice little bubble there. I'm not mad at that. Weird. What one was that? I have no idea. But you saw it. You were paying attention. I was talking about my cool science experiments going on and that you should try it. But there it is. There is your whipped from tallow. I wanted to use this as a teaching moment for everybody since I put all this together for her and sent it through to her. I thought we could use this as an example and a reminder that we do need to pay attention to our fatty acid profiles. And, you know, that's how you do it. And there it is, a whipped sugar soap scrub from a very unbalanced initial soap paste blend. And yeah, all the weird things that I did with it while I was playing just to see what the base will withstand. As you can tell, it will withstand a lot. It also did not thin it out at all. If you're wanting to thin out an overly thick whipped sugar soap scrub, adding oil is not going to do it. And that lather for all of them, all the different iterations, yeah, it's pretty scant. First and foremost, I think, as we discussed in the video, the most important thing when you start adjusting recipes to meet your needs, make sure that you have a reasonable understanding of what all these fatty acid profiles do. I have said time and time and time again, both in the classes that I teach in person for years and here for less years, but also still years. It's all about that fatty acid profile, baby. And it is. And so definitely pay attention to it, especially once you determine what you want that end product to be. So there's that for sure. This was a fun test for sure. And it was a great teaching moment for the person that reached out to me. I think it's a great teaching moment for you guys as well in how you can adjust your soap paste recipe, because I do get a lot of questions about that from people in the Discord. So I hope I answered some. Speaking of things in the Discord, I mean, I guess I'll put this recipe in there. You might have a use for it, you know, that's fine. But it'll be there, I suppose. Sure. Part 4 in this series is going to be actually creating a proper foaming whipped sugar soap scrub. All the foam, all of the awesome, all of the surfactants. And so we will be diving into surfactant chemistry, why you need so many, what they all do, and, you know, kind of the easiest way to make a foaming soap and why I don't ever do it that way. So, you know, be on the lookout for that one. Thank you for joining me for this round of the playlist whipped sugar soap scrubs thing. I appreciate you a lot. A special thank you, obviously, to all of my sudsers. You guys are amazing. If you want to be a sudser, subscribe. If you want to be a membered sudser, I did it. You know, you can become a member and join the Discord fun, and that would be awesome for sure. Regardless, thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. I am out of here, but I will see you all again in the next round of Soapy Fun. Bye.